What in damnation is the Cosmere? Well, I'm glad you asked. For starters, it's a sprawling universe composed of multiple sets of novels. It's the brainchild of Brando Sando, otherwise known as Brandon Sanderson, a startlingly prolific fantasy novelist. One of the most fascinating elements of the Cosmere is that all of the separate worlds that the series' characters inhabit are tied together with a singular, overarching magic system, which all of the other diverse magics are subsets of. Today, we're going to take a brief look at one of these subsets, learning about some of the mechanics behind them, and using the shards and magic systems of Scadrial as case studies to attain a deeper understanding of the practical applications of magic in the Cosmere. In the Cosmere, one of the most important concepts to understand is that of Realmatics, or the study of the three realms and how they interact with one another. These three realms are the physical realm, cognitive realm, and spiritual realm, each separate from the others, but in some ways linked together. The physical realm is where most of the action in the Cosmere takes place, and is more or less analogous to the universe in which you and I inhabit, except, with magic. We can think of the physical realm as the corporeal aspect of everything in the Cosmere. Where it really starts to get interesting is the cognitive realm, a realm on top of the physical one that consists of thoughts, ideas, and concepts. It manifests as a 2D-ish plane that reflects the geography of the physical realm, but is influenced by how people interact with the physical mentally. As it is a 2D plane reflecting a 3D world, not all movement is going to be one-to-one between them, and things get pretty weird pretty quickly. Indeed, if a physical person were to travel to the cognitive realm, they could even walk between planets, as all physical space is represented on the same 2D plane. But this does come with some drawbacks. Getting into the cognitive realm can be quite difficult, and getting out is even harder. We're going to look at that a little bit deeper in the video. While we're on the cognitive realm though, perception is huge there. And the way that characters perceive and interpret things in the physical realm affects the way that their cognitive aspects behave and are portrayed. When humans are in the physical realm, their souls appear in the cognitive as hovering lights or flames that move around as their physical bodies move around in the physical. If you think the cognitive realm is cool, you're gonna love the spiritual realm. It is by far the most abstract of the three realms, and the one we know the least about. It is everything, all in one place. All times, all locations, all people, all magic, shoved into one arcane spiritual goop. If we think of the physical as three-dimensional and the cognitive as two or 2.5 dimensional, the spiritual is one singular dimension. To fully understand the spiritual realm, we're going to have to look a little deeper into the nature of magic in the Cosmere, and to do that, we're going to have to talk about a concept called Investiture. The first thing we have to understand about magic in the Cosmere is that it's not actually magic in an abstract sense. It is written to be more like a physics system. And much like a real-world force of energy, the Cosmere-wide force of Investiture follows its own set of thermodynamics. And as we get deeper and deeper into the books, these laws are quickly becoming more defined. Like energy, Investiture can't be destroyed, only redistributed. Its makeup varies in the physical realm, and we've seen it appear in solid, gaseous, and liquid forms. On Scadrial specifically, Investiture is very linked with metals, and so a fair portion of the Investiture that manifests in the physical realm becomes the god metals known as atium and lerasium. But Investiture does still manifest in gaseous forms, such as the mists, or liquid forms, such as at the Well of Ascension. Now let's take a look at what this Investiture on Scadrial actually does. Scadrial's two shards, Ruin and Preservation, created Scadrial using their collective investiture, and three magic systems arose on the planet. One of Preservation, called Allomancy, one of Ruin, called Hemalurgy, and one of the two of their investitures combined, called Feruchemy. In Allomancy, Investiture is passed down through genetics, with certain people able to access various magical abilities by swallowing raw metal. They then burn this metal inside their bodies and use it as a sort of fuel to briefly form a connection to preservation, and in doing so, access the magical abilities that have been passed down through their genetics. People can be gifted different abilities at birth, such as strength, enhanced perception, or the ability to influence the emotions of those around them. Each ability is accessed by burning a different metal, and most Allomancers only have access to one ability. Those with access to only one metal and ability are known as mistings. However, some rare few are born with the ability to access each of the 16 metals. They are known as mistborn. They are super OP. As long as they have access to enough metal, they can use their abilities to soar through the air by pushing and pulling on metal objects, they can influence people's emotions, and they can get super duper beefy. It's bananas. The feruchemical magic system bears a passing resemblance to allomancy, using various metals as conduits to access abilities. Their abilities are also passed down genetically, as is the case with allomancy, but instead of burning metals, feruchemists wear their metal as rings or bracelets. These are then used to store abilities, which they can access at a later time. This can be extremely powerful, but comes at the cost of having to spend the time storing the abilities they'd like to access. For instance, a feruchemist could store strength. In this case, it can store intelligence, knowledge, health, perception, connection, all sorts of things. 16 different things to be exact, much like allomancy. During the early history of Scadrial, all feruchemists could access all abilities, but this became rare over time. By Era 2, the feruchemist gene pool was diluted to the point that only one metal and one ability can be accessed. These users are known as fairings, similar to mistings. Though rare, it is possible for a person to be born with fairing and misting abilities, and they're referred to as twinborn. The final of Scadrial's 3 magic systems is by far the weirdest, but in my opinion the most interesting to study. It's known as hemalurgy, and was created solely by Ruin. Anyone in the Cosmere has access to this system, as long as they possess the knowledge of how it works, intent to use it, and the ability to stomach how it actually works. Because boy does this magic system get gruesome real quick. It involves stealing another person's magical abilities by killing them with a metal spike and then implanting that spike within the hemalurgist's own body. A practitioner can steal allomantic and feruchemical abilities, but it doesn't just stop there. A practitioner of hemalurgy can also steal investiture that originates from other shards entirely, giving them access to magics they would not be able to attain being born on Scadrial. Mr. Sanderson has been cagey about how this might actually work, and chances are that we won't actually be seeing this in action until we get a bit later in the Cosmere. But being able to steal and then utilize other magical abilities opens up Pandora's box as to what's possible, and potentially allows some super duper interesting combinations of investiture. In the meantime though, hemalurgists have only been stealing allomantic and feruchemical abilities, which may be overpowered in and of itself, to be honest. And while this system is more open-ended than the other 2 metallic arts, there are some significant drawbacks to note. First off, the very process of stealing investiture from another being is end negative, meaning that any investiture stolen will be at least slightly weaker than the original investiture taken. Secondly, being spiked opens you up to direct influence from Ruin. The more spikes you have, the easier it is to be controlled and manipulated by Ruin, or potentially even other shards. Speaking of which, we should probably talk about what shards actually are. Put simply, shards are gods. To put it more technically, shards are 1/16th of a proto-god and are thus 1/16th of an infinite magical power. It makes sense? No? Okay, let's back up. A long time before the Cosmere, as we now know it, there was one god named Adonalsium. He created crab planets, chilled out on the planet Yolin for a while, and did generally god-like things. Then, one day, he died, or agreed to die, or couldn't prevent his own death? It's not really clear. Either way, 16 mortals chose to ascend to aspects of this divine being's infinite investiture, dividing this entity into 16 parts, one for each of them. They ascended to an infinite godhood bound to the intent of their corresponding shards. Some of the shards that have been confirmed so far are ambition, cultivation, dominion, honor, and many, many more. Hopefully, with the words associated with them, the whole intent part of this is made a little more clear. To clarify, the shard itself is the raw power based on its intention, while a vessel is the being that holds the power and controls it. Vessels can be killed, and the power that the vessel held can then either be picked up by another mortal, or will just sort of linger around, waiting for someone fitting to pick it up. We'll get a little bit deeper into this concept when we talk about Cell next episode. Though the vessels of these shards do have a certain amount of control over their power, they are ultimately influenced by their shard's intent. It doesn't really matter how strong-willed you are. For instance, the vessels Ruin and Preservation were actually friends before the Shattering, and thus used their collective powers to, together, create Scadrial. But, over time, the intent of their shards influenced them more and more, with Preservation wanting to keep things the way they are, and Ruin ending up an out-of-control, divine force of entropy. Things were bound to come to a conflict sooner or later, regardless of how good of friends they were before the Shattering. The very nature of the power they hold innately pitted them against one another. It is unclear how much direct influence a vessel has over a magic system's form, if any at all. It is also unclear if Firukami was created accidentally or on purpose, as it was born out of both Ruin and Preservation. For now, we'll just say that though a shard's intent definitely has a strong influence, it is unknown how much of a role individual vessels have in shaping the actual mechanics of a magic system. It's also unclear how much say a vessel has in how their physical investiture actually manifests. For instance, the mists on Scadrial are Preservation's investiture manifesting in the physical realm, but we don't know how much of a say Laris, Preservation's vessel, has in choosing whether it manifests as mist or some other form. And while we're on the subject, we should also talk about another manifestation of a shard's physical form, their god metal. Each shard has a corresponding metal, which are conventionally named after their shard's original vessel. Both Laris and AT have metal named after him, Lerasium and Atium respectively. Depending on which metallic art it's used in conjunction with, Atium has a profound temporal effect, allowing an Allomancer to see shadows of the future and a Feruchemist to store youthfulness. Lerasium, when burned, grants full Mistborn abilities, like permanently. Again, it is unknown how much a vessel can influence the amount of their metal that manifests. It should be noted that each god metal we've seen on Scadrial has appeared near a perpendicularity, which is the final concept we'll be touching on today. Remember how we talked about the three realms at the beginning of the video? Well, a perpendicularity is an intersection of all three realms, but in one location. They're caused by large concentrations of investiture, and as far as we know, every shard possesses at least one perpendicularity. At the beginning of Mistborn Era 1, there are 2 total perpendicularities on the planet. Ruins is in the Pits of Hathsin, and Preservations is located at the Well of Ascension. Those that are Cosmere aware can use these to transport in and out of the cognitive realm. Technically, these are also connected to the spiritual realm, but it is unknown if travel there is possible, or what that would even look like. And this stands for every planet, not just Scadrial. The spiritual realm is weird, and we have no clue if physical beings can actually get in or out, save for ascending. What is important to note here is that it is possible for Scadrian people to access the cognitive realm, even if only a few of them actually know what that means or what it entails. By extension, this also means that Scadrians have the potential to travel off-world, though this becomes harder the more heavily invested an individual person is. Something about being granted investiture by a shard binds you to them, making it much harder to get off the planet that the particular shard is inhabiting. Depending on the shard and the magic system you're connected to, the level of difficulty this entails can fluctuate. We'll look at this a bit deeper when we travel over to Cell next episode, as its magic systems and shards are all sorts of messed up. But suffice it to say, there aren't too many people looking to get off-world in Mistborn's first era. At that point, they're more or less completely consumed by internal planetary problems to look elsewhere. Now, it's important we look over a few examples of investiture in action so that we can combine all of the aspects we've learned and form a more cohesive picture of how investiture works. Let's start with allomancy. For this example, we're going to be looking at a tin eye misting, that is, an allomancer that can burn tin to enhance their senses. This tin eye was born with the ability to use tin, as preservation's investiture is passed down through genetic lines. They swallow tin, and since they are invested, can burn it inside themselves. When the tin is burned, it creates a link to preservation in the spiritual realm, and the tin eye's senses are enhanced. A Fruitmist is also born with their abilities passed through their genetic line. In this case, let's say a pewter fairing. They've been storing up their own strength for several months in various pewter rings and bracelets, and now want to tap into it. When they do, they get real nice and beefy, their muscles swelling up to utilize the strength they've been storing. Now they can throw big rocks or something. I don't know. When the pewter mines, those pewter rings and bracelets, are used up, the person returns to a normal size. To get swole again, they would have to store strength for a while. It should be noted that all the investiture is actually doing in this situation is allowing the storage of strength into a pewter mine. It's not the investiture that gets a practitioner swole, it's the time that one spends in a weakened state storing strength. The investiture itself is just allowing the storage and the transfer of that strength. Finally, we have hemalurgy, and warning here, it's gonna get a bit gruesome. All you need to be a hemalurgist is the knowledge of how to perform it and a subject. You're also going to want to make sure the subject isn't someone you like, because unfortunately, they are going to be super dead after you're done with them. Basically, you stab a spike into someone invested, which kills them and steals their corresponding magical abilities. Then, the spike is driven into the flesh of the hemalurgist and stays there more or less permanently. Since the spike itself is what contains the stolen investiture, it allows the hemalurgist to access a weakened version of whatever power that original invested person had. Finally, it should also be noted here that the only investiture involved was that stolen from the original invested person. No new investiture is being added in the process. In this video, we've gone ahead and laid the groundwork for a better understanding of Realmatics, Investiture, and the Cosmere as a whole. I'll be taking these concepts we learned today and expanding on them in future videos, with new planets, new magic systems, all sorts of fun stuff. Indeed, the concepts that I've laid out today form a framework through which we can interpret the Cosmere's magic systems, and will help us form theories and analyze the books on a deeper level. I picked Scadrial as a starting planet for this series because of how straightforward its magic systems are, at least relatively speaking. Next time, we'll look at the planet Cell, which has a much more complex set of magic systems. This will allow us to delve much deeper into the nature of investiture and introduce some of the more interesting and abstract concepts in the Cosmere, such as intent and connection. I cannot wait to see you there. Lord Ruler, I've had fun going over all that with you. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for some quality creme posting, as well as general updates. Have a fantastic day, folks.